Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Chillon. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes with Prakash, the CISO of CloudBees. Lots of exciting discussions today about what's coming with CloudBees in the next few months, but also how did CloudBees manage to reinvent themselves, having almost 11 years of existence with Jenkins. So it's going to be very interesting to look at kind of the technical debt and what it takes for open source projects to keep innovating, even after over a decade of innovation. So stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 10 minutes. Also, if you want to share, you're here, put your name and company on the comment section so we can highlight you on the screen as well. Thanks so much. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Chillon. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to be starting in about 8-9 minutes with Prakash, the CISO of CloudBees. Thanks so much for all the guests joining us every week. Excited to see you guys. I see Eddie here, the best salesman of 2022. Good to see you. Also, JJ and Bradley as well. So stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 8-9 minutes. Also, if you want to share you here, put your name and company in the comment section so we can highlight you on the screen. Thanks so much. It's going to be fun. Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning. This is Nick Shalom. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes with Prakash today, the CISO of CloudBees. A very interesting discussion about how to innovate with an open source project, Jenkins, that's already 11 years old, but also what's going to be the plan coming next for CloudBees. And we'll talk about cyber and how to keep up with CVEs and all the great stuff that CISOs all over the world have to worry about. So stay tuned. Also, if you want to share you here, put your name in the comment section so we can highlight you on the screen. Thanks so much again for joining and being so many to come back every week. Excited to see you guys. Stay tuned. We get started about 4 minutes. Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here today in the next episode of In the Nick of Time. Today with Prakash, the CloudBees CISO. We're going to have a great discussion on how to keep up with reinventing yourself so you don't become the next Kodak, and also look at kind of the cyber threats and what you need to think about as a CISO. So very exciting time to join us. Wanted to remind everybody, of course, if you've not done it already, to subscribe to the mailing list in the nick of time.tv. We have effectively a session every Tuesday with a guest, and we have a video every week now on a technical deep dive. The video, if you missed it last week, and you can check our YouTube channel, Nicolas Chillon. Thanks for the subscribe. And of course, if you have not subscribed yet, you should do that. We have about 1,200 people already. Pretty exciting to see that within what 45 days. We released a video last week on zero trust. A lot of great feedback already from so many people, despite being a very contentious subject. A lot of people don't agree with what zero trust is about. So check it out. Give us your thoughts. What are we missing? What could be a good next topic? The video on Wednesday will be about service mesh. So stay tuned on Wednesday. You gotta get an email if you subscribe to the mailing list or follow us on LinkedIn. You're gonna see that video. Of course, you're gonna get a notification also if you click on the little bell button on YouTube to get the notification about the next video. So do that. Thanks so much for helping us spread the word on the tech geeky stuff that we love so much about. So, like I said, today we're gonna have a special guest with Prakash. I'm gonna bring him live in a second, but first I wanted to give you a little bit of his background before we let him also give us more details about his journey. Prakash joined in 2021 CloudBees as the Chief Information Security Officer, Head of Security and Compliance. He drives innovation and trust of their security compliance capabilities as well. So it's not just an internal CISO role. It's kind of also looking at what CloudBees could be doing in terms of security compliance as a product capability as well. Prakash has about 20 years, over 20 years of experience, both in tech and architecture and cyber and compliance. Before CloudBees, funny enough, he was at HSBC, where he led the digital strategy and architecture, helped the organization drive public cloud and container adoption, where he led the global open banking platform used in 19 countries. His most recent role at HSBC was focused on cloud and container security, where he helped create this new security process to protect the UK-based bank, accelerating the journey to cloud and container. Of course, he has fancy degrees, unlike myself, which is always fun. And he grew up in Mumbai in India, where he's actually in India now. It's pretty late, so we're very thankful that he was able to do this. He usually lives in the UK with his family and his two daughters. So if you want to follow him, of course, you have his LinkedIn profile now on the screen. All right, let's bring Prakash on the screen now. Good to see you. How have you been?
I've been well. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for having me and for everyone who's listening in. A great day to you. It's end of the day in India, but in many places,
Yes.
the day is just beginning. So I hope you have a fantastic day ahead of you.
10:30. We're so thankful you're there, and we're chatting before about the fact that India is kind of always buzzing. It's kind of reminds me of New York City, right? The city that never sleeps. I think India is kind of the country that never sleeps, right?
It is, and it's an amazingly young country. The statistics that people normally talk about, 1.5 billion people and massive population and big catchment of engineers and all that, widely publicized. I think what is always surprising when you come here is how many of them are under 35. How many people just beginning their careers, full of energy, full of ideas, full of the ability to work all hours. right? And the drive to
Eager,
make a change.
eager to do it, right? Yep.
Yeah, eager to do it. Absolutely. It always gets
Always.
you. And I come here and go back fully energized.
Yeah, you
Right.
can spend, but you don't want to stay too long because then it's kind of depressing for normal people like us, right? But no participation trophies
Yeah.
in India, unlike here in the US, which is probably why the young leadership here is unfortunately getting complacent, and hopefully that's not gonna let us to not be able to lead in innovation anymore. But we'll talk about your journey first. Wanted to give you a chance for people that don't know you to tell us a little bit about your background. And I kind of did a pretty a poor job at describing your time at HSBC, and you've done so much there, and now at CloudBees. So over to you to give us a little bit of insights.
Uh, yeah, I think the best way to describe my journey would be one that's fairly standard uh, for anybody who starts out in software engineering. You talked about my fancy degrees. The fancy degrees were just nice things to learn along the way. Uh, you know, if you do engineering, which is a standard kind of route, when you grow up in India, you either do engineering or you do medicine if you're interested in science. I was no good at biology, so I chose engineering. And a lot of people will say I was no good at that either. But I think results have been pretty good. I've managed to achieve a lot in engineering over the duration of my career. Interestingly, I did mechanical engineering, and I spent my entire career in software engineering and in banking specifically. I don't have an accountancy degree, but I know an awful lot about banking and banking systems, and arguable how useful today's kids think that knowledge is, but it runs the world. And over the last 25 years, 26 years, I worked in the UK across a wide variety of projects. I have worked on major complex backend systems, core banking systems, renovating them, expanding them, preparing them for the digital era, things like that. Worked on major banking mergers, looked at how you separate banking organizations, so banking divestments. And what you learn across all of these is the more diverse the projects you work on, the more some fundamentals stay absolutely the same. Security is no more important today than it has been for a very, very long time. And when you work in banking, security is paramount, at the top of the line of pretty much any conversation you have. And what you also realize is most of the challenges in security are not that people uh, don't know. It is often that people forget, processes forget, and oversight is very, very common. And what you learn through this experience as you go through is you can tell the signs of when something's likely to go wrong. You get pretty good at judging risk versus just a bunch of findings, a bunch of issues that somebody might come up with, etc. And as you said, in HSBC, I've done a variety of things. I've worked in IT, HSBC and elsewhere before. I've worked across engineering. I've done a lot of coding in my time. I've done a lot of architecture and strategy, setting strategy for organizations. And when you talk about technology strategy, a lot of the literature talks about operational strategy, organization strategy. How do you construct your operating model and things like that? I've predominantly worked on the technical side of technology strategy. What should we do? When should we do it? How should we do it? Why should we do it? Those kind of conversations. And I think it's taught me to focus on the why. And when we talk in cybersecurity terms, and now I'm a CISO, many of the answers and many of the weaknesses are in why organizations do what they do. If you can figure that out, and the processes all have a bearing in history somewhere along the line. We have muscle memory that people overlook. Okay, organizations have phenomenal muscle memory. The larger the organization, the more the muscle memory. The things you do today largely make no sense, but it made sense 20 years ago, so you continue doing it. That's where the gaps begin. And as a CISO, that's where I start looking. Which are those things that an organization does by reflex? That's when you do things that you don't think. That's what opens up the door to a phishing attack. That's what opens the door to a malware attack. And I go looking for those, right?
Yeah,
And
very good. It's very much about complacency too, and kind of routine, and getting used to kind of the normalcy, and then that's where they get you, right? So, and it's kind of an interesting journey for you, right, to move from banking, right, with HSBC to a product kind of open source leading, company like CloudBees. What kind of pushed you to make that kind of a shift?
people ask me that question all the time. HSBC is a completely different world in its own right. And before that, Lloyd's Bank is an equally big bank. It's a different
Right.
world in its own right. There are many, many departments, tiny departments in HSBC that are bigger than CloudBees. Okay, and
Right.
they wouldn't even register in HSBC. They're bigger than CloudBees. So why make this move? And why make this move after so many years in banking? I think I've made a pretty good career out of spotting opportunities for actually making a difference. Now, whether other people agree it made a difference or not, to me, it looks like that was something I found very interesting. I'm going to go do that. It doesn't matter whether it's a massive organization, massive opportunity or not. And working in HSBC, I was, for a large part, I was among the teams that were driving the adoption of DevOps. We were trying to do that across the stack. Didn't matter whether it was mainframe or, the latest new mobile app that was being delivered. We wanted to adopt DevOps across the stack. Get that agility across the stack. Maybe different frequencies and different cadences, but the same approaches, the same methods. And we adopted CloudBees when we started scaling it big time. We started the journey pretty much as most organizations do, with Jenkins and try our feet, with Jenkins, and get a degree of automation going. And when you get beyond a certain point, you need the enterprise support and you need the enterprise capabilities, which is why we started working with CloudBees. About a year ago, in talking to Sasha, and for those of you who don't know Sasha, he's an immensely approachable guy. Please do get in touch with him. He's the founder of CloudBees, and along with his co-founders, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, arguably, they created this ecosystem we today proudly call DevOps. Jenkins was the beginning of automation of software creation. And, some of his insights, and when he talks to you, it's hard not to be impressed. So I was in HSBC dealing with Sasha quite regularly. I was dealing with Francois quite regularly, etc. And what strikes you is, while in the technology industry, we like to think that DevOps is kind of old hat. We've been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt and lost the T-shirt. For the mainstream economy, the story is just beginning.
Yeah.
What we're going to see in the next 5 years in the world of, rapid software delivery, whether you call it DevOps or you call it anything else, high frequency software delivery, a world where software pretty much is the customer experience, regardless of which organization you are. And all that is yet to come. The things we take as advanced technology today, automated deployments and hundreds of deployments a day or hundreds of thousands of deployments a day, etc., is nothing like what it's going to be in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a part of that. I see this as the next big cusp, the next big change that's going to happen in the industry. You can sit on the outside and buy the licenses and use the tech. Sasha gave me a chance to come inside the tent and drive the change.
Yeah.
Here I am.
Fun. And so, when you look at, obviously, you talked about DevOps and kind of the challenges and the fact that, this is just the beginning, of course, of the adoption of DevOps, despite, people claiming otherwise often. What do you think are the challenges, right, when it comes to security and DevOps?
Again, there's a lot of literature in this. We talk about shifting security left. We talk about real-time scanning, etc. And those are all necessary. But I think we've got to understand the basics of why they become necessary. And my philosophy is humans are very, very poor at understanding complexity. Okay. And the odd individual human being is brilliant Examples would be people who work in the space of quantum physics and things like that. If you can understand that degree of complexity, you're an outlier. You're a real unique person. Most of society
0.1%.
is not like that. And
Right.
most of software engineering is not like that, right? Most of software engineering is fairly straightforward applications that we build. So where does the complexity come in? You take an average sized bank. You have, 2,000, 3,000 applications. You take an average size pharmaceutical organization. They will have, 2,000, 3,000 compounds which go into making whatever drugs they make. Okay. And there are systems behind all of these. And when we talk about evolution in software and we talk about microservices, etc., multiply that tenfold, multiply that 24. That's going to be the degree of complexity. That's going to be the degree of interaction between all these parts. You cannot really contemplate these. It becomes humanly impossible to contemplate and assimilate and explain. And then we say, now, to make things really, really adventurous, we are going to change this 10,000 times a day. Do we really think, in our current view of the expertise in the IT world, there are that many people who can stay on top of this complexity day in, day out and not make mistakes? I think that chance is zero, literally zero.
Right.
Okay.
It's
That's
not
where
if
the
but when,
danger in
right?
security comes. Correct. And that's where the danger comes in terms of security. Someone, somewhere is going to miss the ball.
Right. So that kind of leads me to the next question, which is that balance, right, between velocity and security. Effectively, what you're saying is the faster we go, the more likely we're going to make mistakes. People argue, of course, the smaller incremental change, the more likely it is not to break things. But when it comes to cyber, and not just the performance and capabilities, but really kind of the cyber risk you potentially introduce into the environment. You also saw more attacks now from the Lapsus group targeting source code repositories, GitOps, DevSecOps pipelines. So kind of the ecosystem now is becoming heavily targeted as the crown jewel. And so not just the production systems, but even the development environments as well.
Yes, and that is not surprising. That is a standard progression of any threat landscape. Over the last 20 years, we've got very, very good at protecting the perimeter. We've become pretty good at nailing down networks and nailing down infrastructure and all that stuff. It's very unlikely today that you will find the same prevalence of unhardened servers, unpatched servers, and all this stuff just lying around. So all the low-hanging fruit is done. We've fixed it. We got pretty good at it. Where is the threat going to expose next? It will move to the next weak link in the chain, and the next weak link in the chain is how we build application software. The whole business of building software today is, you look around, how much code do we actually write in any new application? It'll be 30% if you're really innovative. If you're pushing the boundaries, and very, very few organizations do that, you're probably writing 50, 60%. The rest are packages you reuse across the board.
Right.
And remember, I talked about muscle memory and the fact that we take a lot of things implicitly on trust. We take packages on trust. I used this package yesterday. It was fine. And, obviously I'll import it again and I'll be fine. How many imports do we include in application software today without even thinking? Right? It's just the de facto stuff. So is it surprising that these attacks have moved to that vector? Not at all. And that's where I think we need to start focusing. And you asked a question about how do you find the balance between velocity and security? Well, I believe this increase in velocity creates those risks, etc. Again, it's not a problem statement we haven't solved before. Throughout human history, whenever we wanted to do something faster, we mechanized it. Okay. A fancy word for mechanization today is automation, right? Except we use it in software terms. And what we really need to do is we need to mechanize this business of making sure that everything that goes through the assembly line is secure. We build cars by the millions every year. How many wheels come off a car when it comes off the assembly line? Very, very few.
Yep.
How many wheels come off software the minute it lands in production? Okay. I have lost count of how many rollbacks I've done in my life. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you figure out when you deploy, you figure out the wheel came off. So we need to get good at that industrialization of the building of software. And part of getting good at it is to automate the heck out of making sure that any software that's built is secure, is safe. And we need to do that. And how do we kill velocity? By saying, I will have all these checkers, I'll have all these scanners, they'll all produce 10,000 different things. And now the engineer who's supposed to write, X amount of features a week is busy looking through dashboards that say what's all wrong with this software. Most of it is noise. So alongside mechanization, we've got to get intelligence in how we figure out for each individual finding, so what? Because organizations traditionally take risk. We have to be able to take risk. Otherwise, you're not a commercial organization. You're not going to be able to serve your populace, etc. There is risk involved in any enterprise. The answer is to figure out what is that risk, how important is it, where is it, and making sure you only fix the ones that matter. If you run after the noise, you'll never finish.
Yeah, ruthless automation was always my recommendation. I remember when I was in DoD, a lot of people reaching out to me and asking me, "Hey, how much should we automate?" Right? And I always said, ruthless automation is the only answer. If you're asking the question, it probably already means you should have automated it. So that's and people then jump to conclusions of saying, well, are we gonna just completely remove humans? I think that's not doable, but at the very least, we should only use humans where they're really needed, and remove the insider threat, remove the mistakes potential that humans would make, and so kind of having that flexibility is kind of very important. So you want to use humans when they bring added value on top, not just when things can be simply automated with the basic technologies. So when you look at the balance, right, between the velocity and security, do you argue when you talk to companies that there's a threshold, by which, if they go past that number, you feel like they are starting to make more mistakes? Or is it just like looking at bottlenecks and looking at the automation landscape and trying to focus on automating and automating and automating?
I think automating poor processes, automating poor capability or poor expertise is just asking for trouble. So you don't do that. I think you have to have, for my advice to most organizations would be, you have to get pretty good at doing what you do, and then you start automating all the grunt work out of it. You can do these in parallel because there are many things
Value
that are
stream
non-science
mapping
today.
Yeah.
And the velocity in most organizations is nowhere near where it is unmanageable today. Okay, they're just getting started. Releases every week are fairly, I would say the adventurous benchmark in most organizations. Okay, and releases every week are fairly manageable. Not everybody is a Google, and not everybody is a Amazon, etc.
Netflix.
They all would love to be that, but they're not. Which means
we do
starting
21 release on platform one. It's not Facebook, but it's pretty good per day. That's not bad.
And so
it's not thousands.
It's not thousands, and there's a lot of time yet for these organizations to get it right. Okay, to put in place the mechanisms that allow you to get it right. The technology to get it right exists. Okay, it's not as if we are inventing rocket science here.
Right.
So how do they find the balance? I think it's like driving, a fast car. Fast cars by necessity have to have things other than just the ability to go fast. You have to have the ability to stop. You have to have the ability to steer. You have to have the ability to prevent crashes. All of these surrounding peripheral ecosystems that you need to, allow you to go that fast, you have to have those checks and balances. Compliance is a bad, you say compliance in an engineering team meeting and everybody groans. Okay?
Right.
The whole point of compliance is to just let you go fast without killing yourself. Right. And that's why if you look at most regulatory regimes across the globe, it doesn't matter which country it is in, they are designed to protect your customer. They're designed to protect the person on the street. They're designed to protect employees, etc. And in the main, regulation and compliance is all about risk management, which means you can close your eyes and go fast. Somebody somewhere is watching your back. Okay.
Right. Right.
And we need to make sure that that compliance becomes transparent and not something you have to talk about in an engineering team. It just happens.
Right.
If you look at fast cars, traction management, anti-slip braking, all these things happen without you thinking about it. When's the last time you thought about skidding when you brake? I haven't. In 20 years of driving in the UK, I haven't. The car takes care of it for you. That's what we need. The software assembly pipelines simply need to take care of it for you. Shouldn't be something you consciously think about.
Yeah, it's baked in and not just bolted on, right?
Correct. Yeah. And we're very close to achieving all those things. We can do that today.
I think the issue is, of course, in some nations, probably here in the US more than others, there's a little bit of over-regulation, and people are, starting. If you look at the DoD regulations, for example, there's a lot of kind of unnecessary steps that were created because some people made mistakes, and then we overreact and we create more and more requirements, and then most people would argue, when you look at how much we spend here, you probably spend 60 cents per dollar on just bureaucracy, paperwork, acquisition stuff, and that's probably where it starts to become a part. And I think that's why a lot of people are frustrated, but it shouldn't be the norm. I think the difference is overreacting. I'm always cautious when I see things happen. I was looking at the Congress committee. The House had a committee on open source, and I was very afraid that when they started talking about different vulnerability on the open source side, that they were starting to talk about like Log4j and things, they were going to overreact and start making claims that open source is not safe compared to other software, and so I'm always cautious when it comes to I guess government bureaucracy that people don't overreact.
Yes, and I think overreaction happens because we don't quite understand the risk. We don't quite understand the drivers of that risk.
People make decisions on things they don't really understand. Yeah. I was impressed. It was one of the congressmen that was actually a coder, and he was talking about programming languages, and it's kind of funny then comparing the question he was asking to some of the other congressmen and women questions, because they clearly didn't have the same background in technology, and you could tell they were kind of talking and using terms that probably their staffers had prepared, and then you could tell they didn't really understand what the question really meant, but that's okay.
But I think having worked in a fairly regulated industry for a long time, you get an appreciation for the fact that all the people who are kind of tasked with doing the regulations and setting up with policies and all this kind of stuff, their outcome that they're going after is something very different. It's about safety for the person who doesn't understand what you're talking about.
Okay? Right.
It's about, and are we going to get these kind of humorous exchanges? Of course we are, And I have these humorous exchanges with my kids when they talk about music. I know nothing about music. They know a lot about it. And you could say that the role is reversed, right? And I make a fool of myself. So I think the important thing is to work in collaboration with all that. You mentioned open source being a risky thing. It's a very, I think it's a philosophical debate in the end.
Oh, by the way, I don't agree with what. I don't think it's actually more risky than commercial software, but that's what they were claiming.
So what we've seen throughout history is, open systems are generally better in the long term. It's just, because there are more good people on the planet than there are bad people on the planet. Can open systems be abused? Yes, they can. Can, freedom and responsibility and accountability be abused? Yes, it can. But eventually, the system rights itself. Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe the open source ecosystem, flaws or not, is a better world than a world which is not transparent, where you don't quite know what's actually going on, etc. So the open source ecosystem has a very, very long life ahead of it. I think, the blips that we see today are just blips. We'll find ways to address all of those. And I say this with confidence. Correct. And I say this with complete confidence because, in CloudBees, the Jenkins platform is an open ecosystem. We have the same challenges anybody else who's looking after an open ecosystem has. But we're managing to stay on top of it, and we're doing quite well, controlling it and making sure it continues to be safe. It's just you have to consciously expend effort, making sure you stay on top of these things. Okay.
And I think that kind of really got accentuated when they hired you. I could tell. I had a few. I guess I'll call it heated conversations with CloudBees in the past on some CVEs, and they took it seriously, to their credit. Unlike Atlassian, where they had 1,400 CVs on Jira and Confluence and did nothing for years. CloudBees took it seriously and wanted to tackle this very fast, and then they were kind of struggling also with fixing the process to make sure that new features wouldn't bring more CVEs and kind of compound the problem. And I could tell when you started, which I'm not going to take credit for you to be in the company, but I think the pressure I put on CloudBees back then kind of pushed them to get a good CISO part of the team. So whatever. But I think what's pretty cool is to see the drastic impact that you could have without disrupting the velocity of the work.
Thank you. I'm flattered you think I'm a good CISO and don't really mind whether you take credit or not. You're welcome to all the credit.
Look, you did 90% of the work, so
Yeah. The key thing I think is it's never one person's job. It's a team job. You often ask, or I get asked, you ask, and I get asked all the time is, how do you stay on top of something like Jenkins, which has such a huge footprint, 70-80% footprint on the planet in terms of CI. It's an open ecosystem. There are 2,000 odd plugins. Anybody can rock up and write a plugin for Jenkins. How do you manage this complexity? And the first step, I think, as an organization has to be, if you have problems, acknowledge them. The fact that somebody called Nick calls you up and says, "Hey, you got 20 vulnerabilities or whatever in your system," or "I don't agree with this thing you're doing." If I'm so close that I don't want to listen to you, sooner or later I'm going to fall down a hole.
Yeah.
Okay? And I think the credit to the CloudBees culture and management is we may not agree with you, but we'll listen to you. And if we think what you're saying has merit, we will do something about it. We're not interested in hiding and sitting on our backsides and hoping the problem goes away. Problems never go away. Okay.
Yeah, they compound.
They hang around until they can bite you.
Yeah. Companies that try to put their hand in the sand. I remember the discussion with Atlassian where they were saying that because the CVE was not in the code path, and they had 1,400 CVEs, and allegedly they could demonstrate that each of the CVEs was not in the code path. I couldn't verify it because I had no access to the code, but you also have a tough time be able to demonstrate kind of the compounded risk of all these CVs potentially interacting with each other and potentially escalating privileges. And and their take initially was because it's not in the code path, we're not going to update the dependency. So they had dependency that were 7-12 years old, sitting there with CVEs not updated. And I always struggle with that, right? It's like, why would you not proactively fix the stuff and update the dependency, even if it's not what you think is a cyber risk, but it's still tech debt to be sitting with a 7-year-old, plugin or dependency.
Yeah, and this is what I meant by you have to stay on top of the game, and tech debt is an interesting concept in itself. Okay. Day one after your release, you have tech debt, whether you want to recognize it as that or not. Okay. So as we release software, we are constantly creating tech debt. The good organizations manage that proactively. They invest time and effort. The main challenge is always going to be a management challenge. You have a finite amount of time. You have a finite amount of resources. How much of that do you devote towards new features and new capabilities and new markets and all that nice stuff that you like to talk about as an organization? How much of it will you consciously and wisely invest in doing the boring stuff, which is cleaning up after yourself, making sure you catch up to where the world is? And one of the things we've done quite successfully in CloudBees is staying on top of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, if you take, we have a wide variety of products over and above Jenkins, and we work in the space of CI. We have CloudBees CD, which is in the continuous deployment world. We have feature flag management. We have CloudBees compliance. All of these, and we are not unique. Every other competitor, regardless of whether they want to talk about it or not, every other customer, regardless of whether they want to talk about it or not, has a tech debt problem. Because, like I said, day one after you release something, you are tech debt.
Yep.
And our job in leadership in CloudBees is to make sure we stay on top of that we give teams the space and the ability and the resource to fix these things. Because it's foolish hoping that somehow in their crazy 5-day week they're going to find a magic to somewhere to go clean up. You have to proactively make time and make bandwidth available
Put
to
in
do
the
these things.
backlog, right? Yeah.
Correct.
And not just wait for a catastrophe or things to go so bad that you have no choice but to shut down production for a month to clean up the aisles, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
you talked about. No, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was saying, and you have to get pretty good at finding all these things that matter as well. It's not easy.
Yeah, they're
You
hiding,
talked
right?
about, you talked about code paths not being relevant. That's true for a lot of the CVEs that get found. It takes a lot of effort to keep proving that the code path
Yeah,
doesn't
it probably
execute
takes
that
more
piece
time
of
to
code.
prove it than to update the dependency, right?
Yeah, and
I
that
told those
should be.
guys, I said, the time you spend like explaining to me all the 1,400 CVs to all your customers is probably worth, just fixing the freaking dependency, right?
Yeah, and it's for us, it's a little bit harder because we got to take a community together with
Yeah,
us.
you have the plugins and the community
Correct,
aspect.
and it's sometimes curious and funny, the conversations about some plugins. We can't find the person who wrote the plugin. Okay,
Yeah,
and it's just there and it's widely used. Then we have these circular conversations about who's going to adopt it now,
right.
because somebody
That's
has to
kind of the
adopt it.
issue with open source, right? And that's kind of maybe the risk of some open source projects, right? You're talking about the community. Of course, many projects are small and tiny with one or two maintainers, and that's a different risk posture, right? To have less people, less eyes on code, not knowing really who is behind something, and you're kind of facing different kind of risks when it's a smaller community than compared to a Jenkins main code repo thing, right? And so the plugins and the kind of smaller projects and dependencies is usually what comes and bite you, right?
It is, and yeah, I guess it's never going to be easy. You have to stay on top of it. It's never going to be optional. So, as you said, you can either acknowledge it and get the job done, or you can pretend it doesn't exist until it bites you.
Most companies, unfortunately, that I see nowadays are in the business of exits, right? So they wanna grow fast, go to the unicorn status, right? The magical unicorn status that you guys actually achieved, and they want to sell and then move on. So hopefully they're gonna be gone by the time it comes and bite them, right? But I don't know if that's a good way to build businesses, right?
Uh, yeah, I guess I'm not the right guy to comment on whether that's the right. Lots of people have made phenomenal successes out of that kind of a strategy. Um,
Yeah, I don't
I
like it.
haven't yet.
I'll do it for
So
you. I don't like it. I like sustain. I like real long term value to this world, not
yeah,
just the snowflakes, But
yeah.
so anyway, you talked about something that's obviously is very interesting to the group here, with the work you've been doing on the compliance and the automation side of the what we call here in DoD and in the government the authority to operate. Very similar process to some of the banking and healthcare industry, and of course, the continuous ATO process is a big challenge, right? And there's a lot of paperwork, compliance things. There's real security versus just a paper exercise, right? But all of it is important to different degrees, right? So how do you make it real, and what have you been working on to kind of help there?
So I think it helps distill ATO into, um, you know, what is it actually trying to achieve? It's basically trying to say you're able to assess everything that you do, your software, your systems, your wider ecosystem partners, etc., for whether they're safe, whether they comply with the rules that exist, etc. Nick, I don't know if I'm still live. You seem to have dropped.
Oh, you're here. You're here. We got you.
All right, cool.
You just full screen because you're the main
All right, cool.
most
Thank you.
important
I get the
face. You don't
spotlight.
want to see my face, So
Yeah, so it's about assessing continuously what is your risk position, where are you, and Sibila, I hope I pronounced your name well. I think you make a great point. Observability, logging, metrics, knowing what is going on in real time, and the real time aspect matters, especially as we start talking about container ecosystems, cloud ecosystems, where most resources are ephemeral. Turning up 2 hours after a container came along, destroyed your ecosystem, and then disappeared, what are you going to do? If you don't have observability in real time, you don't have logging in real time, you don't have forensics going back forever, you have no chance of actually figuring out what happened, right? And that assessment has to become real time. Yeah. You take ATOs today, that assessment has a periodic frequency that runs into years.
Yeah, useless.
I'm deploying 10,000 times a day, yet you assess my process every couple of years. I don't know how that gels. So I think continuous ATO, the biggest challenge is how do you change the mindset of the process owners, the people who have to keep everything safe, to say periodic assessments in the coming years are probably going to be useless. They have to be continuous assessments.
Real-time dashboards, real-time visibility.
Real-time, correct. And I have this, pet bugbear. A lot of the whole security industry, we call it posture management and things like that, which are great, nice terms to use. But most of those are subjective opinions. You have to get away from subjective opinions to assertions. You're either safe or you're not. And you believe you're safe because you can evidence that you're safe. Okay? Right. Or if you say, this is my risk threshold, you're able to evidence why you believe that's that, how you arrived at your calculations, what is the data metrics that underpins your assertions. Mm-hmm. And then when someone comes calling and says, hey, can you prove all this to me? You have the evidence. You don't say, yeah, it was on my kind of, S3 bucket somewhere and we purge it every 3 months because we run out of data, etc. That's not good. Data is cheap today. You've got to be able to provide the evidence at any point in time, because most cases, when you need to go back and look at it, it's not that the event happened yesterday. It is that the event happened some time ago, and you have to be able to trace that back. So how do you do all this? I think those are the big challenges in ATO, like any other process that needs to go from predominantly manual, predominantly paperwork-based approach to a highly automated, mechanized approach. Mm-hmm. How do you take the stakeholders along with you on that journey? Because it's not easy to do that. In large organizations, change management is not trivial. So I think that's where we will have a challenge. We will have to build, compliance systems, and CloudBees is working on CloudBees compliance. The whole point of making CloudBees compliance is to make it easy to access. Make it easy for people
have not heard of it, right? So most people have not heard of CloudBees compliance. Give us, is that a separate product from the rest of the suite? How did you build that?
So it's a product that works in conjunction with the suite and with our kind of, the whole ethos for CloudBees has always been about how do I automate the process of creating software. We just extended that to say, how do I automate the process of creating software and ensure it is secure and safe and compliant at the same time? So it's something that blends into the background. As I said, the key challenge for us has always been to make it transparent to the engineers. We don't want it to become the subject of every stand-up, saying, hey, you got 3,000, CVEs to fix. When are you going to fix it? Etc. It has to be transparent in the background, cutting out the noise, identifying the things that they really need to fix, and guiding them to fix it. Okay. The second important thing is we don't see ourselves as the next best scanning tool, the next best malware tool, etc. Those are all niche spaces with a lot of very strong very pedigreed players. We will work with all of them. Okay.
You
If you
integrate.
look at the success of CloudBees, has been this open embrace all the players in the industry.
Yeah,
We'll
you
do
don't
that.
compete with
And
everybody. Yeah.
correct, correct, and we'll integrate with pretty much anything that's going out there. That's a plan. It's a long game. It's not something you solve overnight. And we're getting really good traction and getting
What's the
there.
outcome, I guess, for people using it, right? So you automate, right, the all that those things. Do they end up with some kind of a dashboard to see the risk posture and their state, or
Correct.
what do they get?
So what you get is essentially that continuous ATO dashboard. Are you compliant? Not compliant? These are the rules you were meant to follow. Are you following those rules? What was the
Mm-hmm.
outcome? Where is the data that shows you? All those things I talked about.
Yep.
The risk posture, the what matters, all of that is about the assessment. What is important? What is not? Where do I focus effort? Where do I not focus effort? So we've got dashboards and metrics that show you where to focus your attention. We've got the ability to assert, this is why it is what it is. This is underpinned by data, not somebody turning up and saying, I think it's yellow, blue, green, red, whatever. Okay. And then when auditors want to come and look at evidence, it provides them the evidence to, get there. So it helps organizations, and continuous ATO is not unique to the Fed organizations. In
Right.
banking, we used to call it path to life.
Banking,
In pharma, I'm sure there'll be other names for this.
healthcare. Yeah.
Essentially, it's about how do you make sure you're compliant all the time? Because compliance is one of those fantastic things. I like to joke about it, where the people who make the mistakes don't pay the price. There's some poor person somewhere called the chief risk officer or the chief compliance officer, chief security officer, who gets to go stand and get hammered in the spotlight. Okay.
Yep.
And therefore, we just need to make sure that we get there and we get there fast before the world becomes so complex that the boat's already sailed and you can't really fix it.
It's too late. Yeah. I know a company, RegScale, RegScale, is using the term reg ops, like GitOps, but reg for regulations. It's interesting. Maybe a next wave of a new naming convention thing for regulations. It's kind of the same principle. So your dashboard gives you kind of that real-time visibility. You integrate with a bunch of existing products. What are the kind of the challenges you see? When you look at the DevSecOps now evolving, how do you see this change and morph into whatever is coming next?
I'm pretty certain in the next few years we'll come up with a better name than DevSecOps. Okay, this is a challenge to all those creative people out there.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can name this.
we need a cool name. Okay.
Yeah, we need a cooler name, right?
Okay.
Because
Cool name.
this sounds like the boring guy who just turned up to the party.
Yeah.
But where it'll evolve is it'll become a must-have. Okay. Now, again,
So you're saying companies would not be able to succeed without adopting and embracing it, so they won't be able to compete and move at the pace of relevance, right?
They simply cannot operate. It's like having no electricity and having no water supply and having any of those things.
So you need it.
And if you go to most large organizations today and you talk about their DevSecOps tooling, most of the CIOs, most of the execs don't register the tooling.
They don't realize the importance of it yet.
Correct. Yeah.
It's going to be foundational.
Absolutely. And the important thing is to maintain security. We are going to lock down human access to most of the production systems. We're not going to give you console logins anymore. We're not going to give you, shell logins anymore. It's going to be in Git. It's going to come through a pipeline. Your pipeline doesn't work. You can't fix your production bug.
Yep.
You can't log
in. No SSH.
Right, you can't do anything. Correct. And the DevOps fabric that you have, the DevOps infrastructure that you have in your organization will determine your ability to respond to what's happening in your business. Period.
It's very interesting because it's very interesting because 3 years ago I was telling people in DoD that as a VC investor myself, I would look at the maturity of the DevSecOps pipeline as much so as looking at the talent and and the product as a foundational piece of the puzzle to decide whether or not you should invest in the company.
Yes, and it like I fundamentally believe it will be like electricity. Can any
Yeah,
business operate without electricity today? The answer is no.
right.
It'll become like that because no company can operate without software anymore. No company can operate without a very complex IT estate unless you're a two-person shop somewhere. And if you have enterprise of any scale, this will be mission critical infrastructure.
So we're gonna need
And
a
when
ton
it
of
does
talent,
that,
right? We're
you're
gonna
going
have
to
a
need a ton
massive
of
talent gap.
talent. You're going to need a ton of leadership talent who really understand the complexities of this, who understand the importance of this, and are able to represent it to people whose day job does not involve technology. Okay.
Yeah,
And
that's interesting because that's why we created the chief software officer in the DoD. I was kind of against coming up with a new title that didn't really exist on the commercial side because I felt like, okay, we're going to create some DoD nonsense again. But no, I'm starting to believe the chief software officer and kind of that dedicated person to enable that enterprise service, DevSecOps, platform work, service mesh, security baked in things. It's kind of an interesting concept, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see kind of either VP or C-level exec jobs dedicated to the platform DevSecOps work, right?
absolutely. And so it will evolve. I don't think it's going to be an overnight thing.
Yeah,
The understanding of the space evolves, the criticality of the space evolves. And as I said, in most mainstream organizations, they're just getting started. The beauty of large organizations just getting started is it tends to be an exponential curve in terms of the momentum that they gather.
right.
They're slow to
You see the
start, they take a
results.
couple of years, but once it gets going, it really does get going.
Yeah, and you would say a new startup starting nowadays, not embracing this kind of concept would be a massive tech debt and would potentially be effectively a guarantee that they just can't keep up, right?
Uh, yeah, and I think any new startup starting today, trying to go back to the 1990s with a nice waterfall method that says, I will spend 6 months writing requirement specs, and then I
That's
will
not
spend
that's
another
DoD
six
in
months building
2022, by the way, just to be clear. You have to go back to the
yeah,
90s. You can't just say
yeah.
DoD waterfall default model. It's
Look,
99% of DoD right there.
it helps to have a budget of trillions. Okay.
Or not, right?
Most small
I argue
startups
actually
don't.
because we have so much money, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I argue because we have so much money, we're more comfortable wasting it. And when you look at some of the MOD in the UK and other nations, right, where they barely have 10 or even 5% of the DoD funding, they end up wasting much more and being way more efficient, and maybe coming up with better solutions.
Yeah, and that problem is not unique to the DoD, Nick.
Yeah,
Most large organizations
anyone with
suffer
too
from
much money,
this.
right?
Any large organization has adequate funding. When you have adequate funding, efficient, what do you
Goes out
say,
of the
deployment
window.
of capital isn't great. But
Yeah.
and you'd love to think that banks are very efficient at how they deploy money and how they do projects. They're not. But I think that's really a characteristic of scale. That's a characteristic of size. You put 10 people in a room, you'll get really productive discussions. Things happen. You put 100 people in a room doing the same problem, they'll take 10 times as much time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the average meeting size in the Department of Defense, 100 people, just to say hi. So yeah, that makes sense. So I guess when you talk about evolution, right, of the DevSecOps space, obviously we're shifting left, right, more and more GitOps mindset, less and less people in production and typing stuff on Linux, on SSH, right? So that's a big shift, right, for these people to effectively almost reinvent themselves from a Linux administrator operation side to some sort of a developer to some degree, with not with special kind of site reliability engineer, modern DevSecOps engineering stuff. That's that's gonna be a pretty big gap of talent. So companies are gonna struggle when they're going to wake up and realize, wait, we can't keep up with our competitors because we don't have DevSecOps or enough maturity in DevSecOps implementation. So we need to catch up. They're going to want to do it, and then they're going to realize there's everybody's already in a cushy job, being very well paid. I remember in DoD, we would easily see between $500,000 to $1 million per person. Of course, paying a company taking 50% of the cut to be able to find good top DevSecOps engineering talent. So you can imagine it's just going to get worse. That's probably for people listening, if they want to learn something in life, you probably don't see this kind of opportunity to learn something that's fairly recent and not that complex to learn, and yet potentially making quite a bit of money, right?
It is, and I don't think you're describing a future state. That is the state today.
Yeah,
talent
it's already
is
there.
the biggest
It's already
challenge.
there.
It's over here, so it's not tomorrow's problem. It's
not
today's
tomorrow.
problem.
Yeah.
And
it's gonna compound. It's gonna get worse.
Correct. And it's curious how the world evolves. If you go back to when we started our careers, early 90s, etc., we weren't called full stack engineers, but you did everything.
Right.
You built the screen, you built your server side, you did the admin, you built your infrastructure, you did everything.
Yeah.
Today we've got a nice title. The creative people have now come up with a nice title. It's called a full stack engineer.
Same thing. We need a better name for DevSecOps. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
we do. We need a more marketable name. But it's not surprising. 10, 12 years ago, I think Mark Anderson said software is eating the world, and everybody said, nice catchphrase. Yeah, we will repeat it, but we won't acknowledge it. Then we said we're going to do digital transformation. What's the end outcome of digital transformation? Pretty much everything your organization does is now run by software. Branches don't matter, shops don't matter, physical logistics largely transform into software logistics, etc. So are we surprised that we need 10x, 20x, 30x more software engineers, more infrastructure engineers, etc.? I don't know why as a society and as a civilization we are surprised. Yet, how many schools actually have graduates coming out with computer science skills? So we need to plan better. Okay, it's not surprising.
And most of the schools are, have obsolete curriculums, right? I was trying to help some of the top universities here after leaving the department, and every time I told them, hey, you need to update the curriculum at least once a year, they were freaking out, saying, oh, you will only do that every 3 to 5 years. I'm like, you can't do this in DevSecOps. It's moving too fast. And so they even struggle, despite charging an arm and a leg to get you your fancy certificate and diploma. They just don't know how to continuously update the curriculums. The professors are often so far behind that it forces companies like Google to create their own training even after they hire someone coming out of a fancy university. That's not efficient, right? It's just and I assume in India you have so much talent, and we every company I'm helping or advising right now is fully staffed of amazing talent coming from India. So you guys over there must be doing something pretty right, because they're taking over pretty much all the innovative IT companies.
Yes, and it's very debatable whether we're doing everything right in India.
Right.
I suspect where it will all evolve into is universities should focus more on teaching you the why, the fundamentals, the theories, why algorithms are written the way they are, why systems are built the way they are, what does good practice really look like.
Right.
Because kids today will learn the new languages themselves. You don't need
it's going to change.
Sending them to university to learn a computing language is a waste of time.
Yeah.
They will pick it up themselves, just like they pick up any other language.
Yeah.
Correct. So I would want universities to focus on teaching the whys. What I'm always worried about is superficial coding skills without understanding how things actually work.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what they just know the top layers, right?
Correct. That causes the nightmares that we have to live with every day.
Yeah.
So I'd rather they spend time really getting the depth of why does software work the way they are. I'm amazed at how many engineers I come across who don't know even the basics of how CPUs work.
Yeah.
Okay. What exactly does a RAM do? What exactly is a heap? What is a stack? If university, these things are not going to change that dramatically. Okay,
Right.
they'll get better, they'll get faster, and all that is given. But why they do what they do will stand the test of time. And I need universities to kind of start teaching that basics and teaching it to a lot more people,
Yeah.
not just those who want,
Yeah. Pretty
2%
much
to
everybody
3%
should at
that
least
major in
know that,
computer
right?
science. Correct.
Pretty much like there should be a high school class, right, or
High
something
school
like
thing.
that. I don't know.
Correct. Yeah.
Even maybe earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And the languages will sort themselves out. Today
Oh yeah.
it's Golang and Rust and things that are fashionable. Tomorrow it'll be something else. Today it's Docker containers that are fashionable. Tomorrow it'll be something else.
Yeah.
Kids will pick all that up. I'm not worried about that bit. I'm worried
Yeah.
about them understanding the depth.
And the other piece I always argue is also like we should be focusing on teaching how to learn, and self-learning is going to be key, right? I see so many people struggling, particularly when those people are not passionate about IT, right? They have a tough time. They took the job because they wanted to make good money, and that's fine, right? So, some of us, when we started, it was about the passion of IT, and we just loved it. I remember an interview I had in my office maybe 10 years ago back in France with a developer that told me they didn't have a device at home. They didn't have a laptop at home. I'm like, what do you mean? You're a developer. You don't have a laptop at home. Like, how is that a thing? That just tells you like, a lot of people were in the jobs to make good money, which is fine. But I would argue it would be pretty tough to keep up and stay up to date in IT, particularly with the velocity of change that you see now in IT. If you don't know how to learn.
Yes, and I think increasingly that is true of every walk of life.
Yeah.
Life is changing so fast that
YouTube.
regardless of which domain you're in, if you can't keep up with the pace of learning, if you can't keep up with the curiosity that is required to do that learning, because
Yeah.
it's very difficult to be curious after long days of work, etc. If you can't maintain
Yeah.
that curiosity, that energy,
But
you're going to
it's true
struggle.
also that not every job moves as fast. I mean, look, there's different velocity, right? You look at
Yeah.
healthcare, which is a fast moving environment, is not moving as fast as software. I mean, it's certainly big, right? And you look at automotive and different industries. I mean, the fact is, software is probably the fastest pace you can see in the world. Because of that decoupling with the hardware and the ability to just constantly innovate and think outside the box. But the learning piece is, universities don't do a very good job at showing, and enabling people to find out how to keep up, where they should pay attention to in terms of new source of knowledge, right? And how to do. A lot of people reach out to me, asking for like what YouTube channel they should be subscribing to. Of course, they should subscribe to In the Nick of Time. That's obvious, but they should also do a few others like CNCF and Linux Foundation and so on, right? But you see a lot of biased content too, right? You see a lot of companies pushing their own secret sauce, cloud providers, right? Getting you locked into a single cloud, and you're learning everything under the construct of a very specific universe, right? And very little decoupling and abstraction. And so I think, learning the right way and the right things is kind of challenging.
It is, and it's only going to get more challenging because, like I said, the complexity of what we're dealing with is going to explode.
Yeah.
It's not going to get simpler. We'll love to make systems simpler. We'll spend a lot of time and effort making systems simpler. But the type of problems we are trying to solve, when we talk about digitization at scale, when we talk about these things, the type of problems are not simple problems. It's kind of silly and foolish to expect that you will get a simple system that solves a complex problem. If that magic existed, 10,000 years ago, we'd have been all right, would have been settled. Right? That magic doesn't exist. Complex problems require complex solutions. That's how it is. And, we got to stay on top of that.
So talking about complex problems, we talked about the massive footprint of Jenkins, right? Released back in 2011, which is a lifetime away for IT, right? I mean, 11 years is like, most people could call things legacy at that point, although you guys obviously continuously innovated and made it so it's not what it was in 2011. But, a lot of things change in 11 years. So how did the CloudBees team manage to continuously kind of think outside the box and reinvent itself? You've seen so many companies, right? Look at Blockbuster with Netflix, missing the boat, and Kodak. And I mean, there's so many examples of companies that were kind of leading the market and then disappear in disgrace, right? Missing the boat, even sometimes with the option to buy the new leader, and missing out on that too, right? And underestimating what those guys would end up doing. Yeah, I believe Blockbuster was almost able to buy Netflix, and they didn't do it, and you see the variation now. So what kind of process and work has it been, at least since what you've seen in the last couple of years, that the CloudBees team had to put together to manage to still be relevant?
Quite a few things. I think you mentioned passion. You have to have passion for what you're trying to do, and you have to have a mission that a large part of the organization believes in.
Yeah.
I'm not naive enough to think that when you start an organization and say, hey, this is the mission we want to really go on, everybody is going to sign up and we're all going to sing Kumbaya and it's all going to be great.
Kumbaya
that
magic.
Doesn't happen. But yeah, but
maybe,
a large
maybe
proportion
SpaceX, maybe SpaceX with Mars, but that's probably the only one.
Yeah, but we need to be realistic that you need a large proportion of your organization that is driven by that mission. And the mission right from the beginning has been, can we automate the process of software delivery such that all the boring stuff gets taken care of? Okay. You talked about humans being used for what they bring to the table, the value they bring to the table. The one thing we've still not found a way of doing easily is bringing human creativity to the table, bringing human problem solving to the table. Okay. If we can maximize their time to do that in a world where you're not able to find as many engineers that you want, you have to maximize the productivity. You have to maximize the output they can produce. You don't do that by getting them to do boring stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So that automation, that mission has been kind of a constant. You also talked about people who want to be, flash in the pan, get something up there, make a successful exit, and move on.
Yeah.
Hanging around for 11 years, building an industry year by year by year is testament to the people who created the company. They are in it for the.
That's unheard of. I think that's the only one I know. I don't think I can think of another company.
Yeah. So it's dedication, it's commitment on part of a lot of people who have been around a long time around the Jenkins ecosystem, around CloudBees, who have contributed to this. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you keep innovating? The beauty is when you have a product like Jenkins, yes, there are you when you say it's 11 years old, you can use the word legacy, and I won't complain about the fact that people say it's legacy.
Well,
I'd like to look at it as
it keeps reinventing itself, though. So it's it's not the entire code base is 11 years old, right? So
I would like to think of it as it stood the test of time. How much software on the planet today has stood the test of time? There are, like I said, 70 to 80% of the footprint of DevOps automation is Jenkins or CloudBees CI, which is the enterprise version. That is a huge footprint. Yeah. What that gives the product is the ability to solve very, very different problems every day. That community helps grow the product. If you look at the coverage of what Jenkins solves today, and even now I'm amazed when I talk to customers at the creative uses of Jenkins that people have kind of come up with. Okay. Yeah. It does some amazingly complex stuff in large organizations. There are people running, tens of thousands of pipelines in parallel every day with that platform. So it's not trivial. It's big.
Yeah, the scale
is pretty insane. Test of time, very comprehensive, and amazingly for its age, extremely flexible.
Right.
Okay? Now, having said all those fantastic positives, does it have challenges? Of course it does. I'd be a fool to say it doesn't. Okay. And it takes effort to stay on top. Security is my pet subject. Anybody who has the ability, please reach out to Wadek Follonier. He's the Chief Security Officer of the Jenkins product. You should probably have him on this podcast as well. Nick, he's a really interesting guy. Knows what he doesn't know about Jenkins security isn't worth knowing. Okay.
Yeah.
This guy spends his life worrying about the security of the Jenkins ecosystem, worrying about the plugins, even stuff he's, kind of not massively a fan of, plugins that he's not a fan of, he will take under his wing and he will make sure
Yeah,
it's okay.
he has no
Okay.
choice to do it. Yeah.
That takes dedication, right? And I think that's what's driven the product. That passion, that dedication, that commitment's what driven product. And if you think about the what do you say, the effort it takes to stay on top of the dependency tree that we have, the effort it takes to stay on top of 2000 odd plugins, for many of which we don't know who's the person who's maintaining it anymore, doesn't have any maintainer, etc. And making sure all of those things are okay. And we're able to advise users, whether they are commercial users or non-commercial users, open source users, advise them on what is the right thing to do. We stay committed to that cause. Okay. And that's what helps us keep reinventing it. There's for those who have time, have a look at a fantastic story called Royal Enfield. It's a English company from the 1940s odd that somehow survived in India until about the 2000s, making motorcycles. Almost went bust 20 years ago. And they reinvented themselves. It is still the Royal Enfield. The bike is still called the Bullet. Today, they're a premium motorbike in India. People will wait in a queue to get one. So age does not mean bad. Age just means you know a lot of stuff other people haven't even figured out yet. Okay?
Do you have one?
No, I don't have one. Not in the UK. The UK is too cold for motorbikes.
Yes, no.
Yeah. But I think that's the important thing. Over the 11 years as a company, we have learned so much about what challenges customers face in doing software automation at scale. Because no two companies are alike. Every individual company has its own set of headaches and set of problems and set of processes. So we've learned a lot. That allows us to keep reinventing what we build. That knowledge goes into the other products we built, CloudBees CD, Feature Flag. All of these are enterprise level. They're all built to be equally flexible. And we're confident in 15 years' time, I'll be talking about all these same products, but in a completely new world, completely new guys still doing the job as well as they've ever done. Okay. It takes commitment, it takes effort, and it takes a passion to say, I'm not in it for the quick buck.
Yeah. And in fact, Sasha was CEO at some point, and then I believe they brought a CEO. That also shows you like kind of the dedication of the founders to bring additional talent to augment the team even at the top level, right?
Yeah, it is. And you have to be self-aware. As an organization, you have to be self-aware all the time. The world's changing, your organization's changing, you need new ideas, you need new talent. And if it's easy to get caught up in this bravado of, we are a unicorn. Yes, we are. That's great. I got a t-shirt. I felt very happy. But the next day is no better or no worse than the last day. You got more money in the bank, which means you can solve bigger problems, which means you can do more work. And the valuation gives you the accountability that you better not screw up. You're a big company now. You're not a kid. You're not a small company.
Yeah.
So the ability to stay humble and get new talent matters. And that's what we're doing.
Yeah, lots of people have money into the company, and you can just burn that out and lose all that money. So that's a big stress factor for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And we are focused on using that money to hire more and more talent. So anybody who wants to join CloudBees, we're looking for lots of deep technical engineers. It's not about building fancy application software. This is serious engineering at scale. So if you enjoy serious engineering at scale, we're looking for talent.
What kind of talents you guys are looking for? Do you know?
Across the spectrum, we're predominantly Java based, but the ability to architect and build very flexible systems that can be expanded, the ability to think out of the box and think ahead of the curve. Okay. And think about the problems that probably nobody's talking to you about today, but you can see it coming and you're building and designing for that. We're going to be as as the market evolves, we will be offering many, many different ways of consuming our services. So it's about reinventing how we do some of the things that we've taken for granted, and building new frontiers. Like I said, the journey is just beginning.
Yeah.
DevSecOps as an industry is just getting going.
So you mentioned, right, when you did the engagement with the compliance product, right? You didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and you partnered with a lot of products in the scanning space and all that, right? When you look at companies, right, like GitLab, right, that come up with this kind of vision of a turnkey, some might say bloated, but some kind of turnkey DevOps platform. What do you think about that vision? Is it something that's because they end up being in a situation where they can't partner because they're competing with a little bit of everybody, right? So what do you think of that vision when you compare with what you guys are focusing on?
So I don't. Those end-to-end platforms, turnkey platforms, have a place and a value proposition in the market. They will do well because the market is huge.
Yes, you
The
do.
market is huge, and it is nowhere near the size it's going to be in 5 years' time. So there's a place
Right.
for everybody to play, and there are different needs across the space. Our belief is ecosystems, and strong ecosystems are necessary to be successful. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we kind of that's what we believe, and that's why it's been the ethos of the company for so long. And we're focused on building an ecosystem rather than I have to be the be all and end all product of every
Right.
problem domain I get into. Okay,
Right.
now it's equally valid to argue that that's an incorrect approach. That's an approach that's worked for us, and we intend to kind of continue that approach. Um,
I think the biggest, I guess, issue I've seen when people want to adopt CloudBees product in DoD, for example, is the fact that because we want to bring everything on Kubernetes and containerized and do the right things, we need a Git repo, right? And so people will usually not be able to go with GitHub because they don't have a container, so they're going to go look at either Bitbucket or GitLab, and Bitbucket is just not that great. So people end up picking GitLab, and so if they end up buying GitLab, then it's just an interesting kind of train of thought of people then arguing, well, why would I buy also CloudBees and just use GitLab for the Git stuff and not the CI stuff. And so there's kind of this conflict, and particularly when people get started, right, where they don't have a lot of maturity yet in CI or DevSecOps, they don't see kind of the differences between the products, and they just feel that getting started there is good enough, and then it's kind of a big lift, right, to move from a GitLab CI to another CI product. So then there's kind of this vendor lock-in slash um, I guess tech debt to move on. So what is you? I mean, I guess on the commercial side, you probably don't have the same problem because people could just use GitHub and GitLab.com and whatnot and just host the code elsewhere. Have you seen others kind of struggle with that, and what could be a solution for people that are trying to have a private Git repo that's not a SaaS, and I guess what could be the answer there?
It's quite a difficult question. You ask a very valid question. It's quite a difficult question to answer, and then
Yeah.
we are debating and evaluating it on a pretty frequent basis now. My own view is private Git repos, as more and more public Git repos suffer from malware and all these kind of things that we talked about earlier. For mission sensitive organizations, private Git repos will become a necessity. Okay,
Right.
it's not
And with the adoption of
not a
GitOps,
choice
Git is
that,
the crown jewel, so you
correct.
cannot, you need Git, right? So it's not
Yeah,
a
you
not a
need
maybe,
Git,
not a
and we'll
maybe.
have Git. Yeah, the challenge is in any organization of any size, it's very difficult to really see a one size fits all approach ever work.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. It's
Do you think
easy to
some people will
embed
be
it well.
willing to buy GitLab and not use? So they would spend the
Right.
money because you can't just buy GitLab the Git repo. You have to buy the full thing, right? So
You have to
you'll pay the
use,
price of the full thing and just pay CloudBees on top.
correct. If I'm trying to optimize productivity, if I'm trying to optimize developer experience, if I'm trying to optimize speed to market, all of these things, the incremental cost and complexity of having a best of breed approach integrated into the thing is actually a one time cost. It is
Yeah.
relatively trivial compared to the overall
Yeah,
price.
it's pretty it's anecdotal. So you're saying the
What we
cost is
need,
anecdotal and they should buy both.
correct. What we need though is engineering leadership, IT leadership that gets this problem space,
Right.
because it's
But
an easy
do you
mistake to
think
make. It's a newbie mistake.
with the importance of Git though, right, becoming kind of that source of truth and that GitOps kind of focal point, right? Do you think CloudBees is going to be thinking of getting involved in the Git space?
Um, it depends. And next time, hopefully, I'll have an answer for you.
Good, but I mean, I guess
But
you would
yeah, again,
argue, and you
but
would argue that I mean, at least it's not a dumb idea.
yeah, it's not a dumb idea. Trying to offer more capability, more value across that life cycle. And
Yeah,
if you talk about our sweet spot as the automation of software from idea through to production, that chain,
yeah.
um, then it's not a dumb idea to think about every aspect, every interaction across that chain.
Because
The
when you guys started, GitLab was just a Git repo, and now it's what they want to be a full DevOps platform. So that kind
yeah,
of became a competitor out of nowhere, right? Before it was no big deal, but now it's kind of okay. What are we going to propose as a Git repo?
yeah,
If people want to pick something, so and I just don't see Bitbucket winning the battle anytime soon. So
yeah. Look, there are every time you get this kind of area where there's a lot of demand and becomes a necessity, you will get a lot of competition. I can't
yeah,
imagine a world where it's only going to be GitLab and it's only going to be GitHub in the Git space. Okay.
right,
Um, the so there are many options in terms of how we bring that value to customers.
yeah,
And like I said, our history has been one of uh, co-opting, collaborating, rather than saying we have to do everything under the sun.
right.
Okay. So uh, we are thinking this through quite frequently, and is it, like you said, is it a dumb idea? Of course not.
Yeah.
Do we have an answer that we believe we are very confident in right now? Not yet. Watch this
Yeah,
space. Someday I'll be back with news on that front.
good. Yeah, I remember bringing it up to Sasha and the team maybe 3 years ago, and I know back then GitLab was not as big as they are now, and it's because they kind of brush it off and say, well, we don't really see the problem on the commercial side, and I think it's changing, and I think that's good that you guys are at least debating what to do on that, because I know you guys have been acquiring right quite a few companies over the years. Um, I guess how do you make sure that those companies integrate into the ecosystem? Because I know I remember when I got briefed on some of the companies you guys bought, the marketing was a little bit confusing because there was a CD product that wasn't really integrated yet with Jenkins at the time, and it was like, I don't understand where the line is, which one do I use when, and under what conditions. So I know for any company that buys something, there's always going to be kind of this transition period, and I think you're now getting past that transition phase where you have a better kind of uniform marketing story on what to do when and how. So what has been that process in the last couple of years that you've seen the companies go through to make sure that those companies integrate into the ecosystem?
So it's a really interesting question with a very complex answer. Um, the Look, integrations are always hard. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter, which business you're in. Integrations are hard, and like I said, early in my career, I did one of the biggest banking integrations. I was part of the core team that merged it's the biggest banking integration on the planet, as far as I know. That's huge size. That's hard. It doesn't matter whether you're integrating a 10% company. It's equally hard. Okay.
Yeah.
It's even more difficult in the software world, because what fundamentally drives the creation of a software product is the vision and the passion of the people who believe in this is what great looks like.
Hmm.
And you now integrate them and you say, actually, we've got a different vision of what great looks like. And we'd
Right.
like you to come on board and adopt our approach and our vision for great.
Hmm.
That's not easy. So will you see that dissonance as you said, a transition period? That dissonance is quite common, I think. And what is noticeable is in the marketing world, but what is often kind of what drives the message that we give our customers, our explanation of our value proposition and what the product does and what the platform does, has become more uniform, become more consistent, because the underlying product is now more uniform, more consistent, better integrated. What we have today is this SDA platform, or the CloudBees platform, which does that spectrum of jobs that you need to do to go from idea to production. How do you integrate software? How do you build software? How do you keep on track of deployment of software and releasing it and managing the governance of that release? How do you do feature flags in production? How do you stay on top of proliferation of feature flags? It's very easy to make one feature flag, extremely hard to decommission the damn thing. Okay.
Yeah.
And then to go figure out that you have tens of thousands of these things running around is not easy. So all of that is now seamless in the platform. We're now building compliance as a seamless thing in the platform. It takes time to align visions. It takes time to align what great looks like, what everybody's outcome needs to be. I think we've done quite well in that space over the last couple of years. And we're starting to see the fruits of that now.
Yeah, that's been obviously very interesting to see quite a few companies buy different companies. You've seen companies like Twistlock get acquired by Palo Alto. Initially, allegedly the company was going to remain separated and separate branding, and surely within a few years that promise got out of the window. And unfortunately, what you see also sometimes is, particularly the bigger companies, particularly publicly traded companies, end up kind of destroying the culture and kind of the branding and kind of a lot of the reasons why they bought the company in the first place. I've been always surprised to see that kind of debacle happen, and then Palo Alto integrated Twistlock into their suite of product, Prisma, and kind of became a bloated capability and very expensive for people that just wanted the container stuff, and it was difficult for existing customers, right? So there's always this kind of balance between integrating the people and the product, and then also making sure you're not burning out or ruining kind of the whole culture and the reason why this company was even successful to begin with, and why you ended up buying it. And it's I think it's easier when you're smaller, publicly traded, privately owned company like you guys, versus the bigger publicly traded acquisitions, because they have a very well defined M&A process that often ends up creating more problems than solutions.
Yeah, I assume they have their own set of challenges and what they're trying to get done. The way we approach integrations and M&A is very simple. The lens that we use is what will add value to a customer. If then what you buy is based on that rationale of this will add value to a customer rather than add value to me as a company,
Right.
That customer value doesn't disappear simply because you acquired a company.
Right.
Okay, and you acquired a product, and now we need to change the culture. You're still trying to solve that same customer problem.
Right.
If you stay focused on that, it's slightly easier to keep egos outside the door,
Yeah.
and collaborate, and then make sure that you start aligning the path of the product life cycle, the product roadmaps, and get to a place where the collective product offering kind of still solves a superset of customer problems that you were trying to solve in the first place. Okay.
Right.
I think we're trying to make sure that we focus on that bit, which is everything we acquire has a certain basis and a certain rationale in a very real customer problem we can't solve today.
Yeah. Well, talking about that, what is the future of CloudBees? And you talked about the compliance product you've been working on, but I'm sure that's the tip of the iceberg.
Uh, I wish I knew what future looks like. It's the future
Well,
is tomorrow. I
the
don't know
short
what
term we
tomorrow
can
is.
the short term future, I guess. Yeah.
No,
Maybe not
the
10,
main thing
maybe
is,
not 11 years, right?
yeah, we are focused on, two things really. The first is we have an immense set of customers today. They're large organizations with complex problems, invested a lot of time and effort and money in the cloud-based platform. We have to keep delivering for them day in, day out. And so if I look at the immediate horizon, it's about continuing to solve new problems that they are bumping into as they try to scale up their organizations for DevSecOps, etc., and evolving the cloud-based platform to do that. In parallel, what we're doing is 3 years out, we believe that the whole IT landscape will be very different. How we build software will be very different. Nobody talks about low code, okay? Nobody talks about generated code. All of these things will become the norm. How does the world or the DevOps world look like in a world of no code where don't really have a formal process to do these things? How does the business of building software look like when you have prevalence of SaaS services across the board? Okay. How do you allow all these different SaaS services? And again, it's very difficult to conceive any SaaS service that will say, we will be the one-stop solution for everything your enterprise needs. Never going to be that. So how do you integrate all of these into producing the applications and the systems that your organization needs, that your customers need? So we're really talking through those aspects of trying to understand what problems and challenges will customers face. How do we build the next gen capabilities into our platform that we need to address to get there? What you don't want to find is, we're so focused on today and so focused on solving today's problems that 3 years hence arrives faster than you think, and the world is a very different place. So that's what you're working towards.
Yeah, that's obviously a pretty big lift, particularly when, like you said, we're moving off of this waterfall mindset, and we always try to do our best to estimate and imagine what the world is going to look like in 2-3 years. But we'll be pretty rich if we were able to be right all of the time, right? So it's always a balance of like commitment to getting things done, but also looking at feedback and delivery of capability to your end users in production to really know what's sticking, right?
Correct. And someone talked about observability and metrics in software. That's true in software. That's true for organizations. We just call it different. We call it feedback loops, and we call it customer feedback and user responses. The one thing human beings are very, very generous with is feedback. You just have to ask. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
The more passionate, the more painful sometimes it can be, but they contain really, really, really good nuggets of insight that you can live a lifetime and not get. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess those are the things we need to keep doing and keep doing well, right? And the future reveals itself. 3 years is not a very long time.
No. Time flies.
Time flies.
Well, I know we're out of time, but I wanted to give you the last meaningful words, because I'm gonna after you're done, I'm gonna tell people about the next guests we have coming next week. So I'm gonna let you tell us your thoughts before we let everybody go. And I wanted to thank you, of course, for taking the time. This was an awesome session. I think people learn a lot. I think it's going to be probably watched a lot. Also the recording, because there's a lot of pretty big gems in what you told us today. So first, wanted to thank you. Second, over to you to give us a little bit of final words, and then I'll tell people about the next show.
So my final word really is just to reemphasize some of the key things I said, which is in this world of software automation, we're just getting started. There are a lot of clever people on the planet. There are many complex problems on the planet. Most of them can be solved, and will be solved through software. Just like that participation, that the confidence that we're just getting started and it's going to get much, much better. We're going to need a lot of talent. So request to whoever is in a position to generate talent, to encourage more people to get into this domain. It's a fantastic domain. And security matters. It's very, very hard to repent at leisure, and it's very difficult to recover from that. So all the engineers who think security constraints and security requirements are a pain, it'll help if you changed your outlook. It makes my life a lot easier. Help us help you, because no engineering team looks good when their application gets hacked. So help us help you. And the last bit, for all the creative folk out there, can we come up with a better name, please, than DevSecOps?
That's a very important last final one. We'll make sure people start working on it. Again, I wanted to thank you. Next week, we're going to have Megan Stamford. She's the VP Chief Product Security Officer, Energy Management at Schneider Electric. So we're going to be talking about something pretty unique, but I think it's very important to people hear about industrial control systems and her idea of incident command system and why ICS systems are so critical for critical infrastructure, what makes them different from traditional IT, and what does the role of a chief product security officer entail, but also, what kind of cyber threats we're facing when it comes to ICS systems as well. So it's going to be a great discussion with Megan next week on Tuesday at 1 p.m. on the 24th. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, be healthy, and thanks, Prakash, for staying so late with us. It was great to see you. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
That was an enjoyable conversation. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.